This is gonna blow your mind. Welcome back to Universal Insight. Please subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon for more updates. Washington is on edge. This isn't just another political fight. This is a constitutional crisis centered on the Supreme Court. At stake, President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs, a move that's rattled global markets and American wallets. The question, how much power does the president really have? On one side, the executive branch claims emergency authority. On the other, small businesses and states argue the president has overstepped, seizing powers meant for Congress. This is about more than tariffs. It's about the very structure of our government. Did Trump stretch the International Emergency Economic Powers Act too far, effectively writing his own laws? The Supreme Court isn't just reviewing policy, it's about to decide the limits of presidential ambition. Can a president unilaterally impose taxes in an emergency? Lower courts have said no, but now the final decision rests with the justices. Their ruling will redraw the boundaries of presidential power for generations. Let's clear up the confusion. As of September 13, 2025, Trump's tariffs are still in effect. Despite big wins for opponents in lower courts, the tariffs remain because of a court-ordered stay. The Court of International Trade and the Federal Circuit both ruled the tariffs illegal, but pressed pause on their own decisions. That stay keeps the tariffs alive while the Supreme Court reviews the case. The stay expires in October, so the Supreme Court is moving fast. The government argued that lifting the tariffs now would cause chaos, and the courts agreed to hold off. So businesses are still paying, and the Treasury is still collecting. The legal foundation for the tariffs is shaky, but the policy stands, at least for now. The stakes keep rising with every day the tariffs remain. Billions are on the line waiting for the Supreme Court's final word. The first blow to Trump's tariffs came in May 2025, from the U.S. Court of International Trade. The court ruled the president overstepped. Only Congress can impose taxes. The judges said the Emergency Powers Act, IEEPA, isn't a blank check for the president to create tax policy. The administration appealed, but the Federal Circuit agreed. The Constitution reserves the power of the purse for Congress. Both courts said IEEPA doesn't let the president impose sweeping tariffs. But here's the twist. Even after declaring the tariffs illegal, the courts allowed them to stay in place pending Supreme Court review. Why? To avoid economic chaos if the tariffs were suddenly lifted, only to be reinstated later. The result: businesses and consumers are stuck in limbo. The legal fight is unresolved, but the economic impact is very real. Now, only the Supreme Court can break the deadlock. With 2 court losses, the administration turned to the Supreme Court, which fast-tracked the case, an extraordinary move. The stakes are massive. If the tariffs are struck down, the government could owe up to $1 trillion in refunds. Treasury Secretary Bessent says the government will pay if ordered. This would be historic. But the bigger issue is power. Can Congress delegate its core taxing authority to the president through vague laws like IEEPA? A ruling for the administration could expand presidential power dramatically. A ruling against would reaffirm Congress's authority and check the executive. The Supreme Court's decision will set a precedent for decades. It's not just about tariffs, it's about the balance of power in American government. Every business, consumer, and future president will feel the impact. Misinformation is everywhere. Headlines claim the Supreme Court has blocked Trump's tariffs, but that's false. Lower courts ruled against the tariffs, but their decisions are on hold. The Supreme Court has only agreed to hear the case. It hasn't stopped the tariffs or issued any orders. The difference between a lower court ruling and a Supreme Court decision is crucial. Businesses are still paying tariffs every day. This case is about the Liberation Day tariffs under IEEPA, not other tariffs like those on steel and aluminum. Mixing up these policies only confuses the issue. The real fight is over the president's use of emergency powers to impose broad taxes. The tariffs are on life support, sustained by a temporary stay, awaiting the Supreme Court's verdict. The outcome is still uncertain, and the stakes couldn't be higher. All eyes are on the Supreme Court as oral arguments approach in November. Lawyers for both sides will face tough questions about IEEPA, history, and the Constitution. After arguments, the justices will deliberate, likely issuing a decision in early 2026. If the court sides with Trump, presidential power expands and the tariffs stay. If the court rules against, the tariffs end, and the government must refund up to $1 trillion. Such a decision would reassert Congress's authority and check the presidency. The nation, and the world, waits for a verdict that will reshape American governance. Will the court sanction new executive power, or restore the traditional balance? There's no middle ground. This is a defining moment. The final verdict is coming, and everything is on the line. In January 2026, the Supreme Court delivered its landmark decision. In a 5-4 ruling, the court decided against Trump, declaring the tariffs unconstitutional. The decision reverberated across the political landscape and international trade markets. The immediate impact was profound. Tariffs were lifted and the government began the arduous process of issuing refunds to affected businesses. Global markets reacted swiftly, with a surge in trade activity. American companies rejoiced at the newfound economic relief, while international partners welcomed the end of a trade war. Politically, the ruling reignited debates about the separation of powers. Congress, emboldened by the decision, moved to reclaim its authority over trade policy, proposing new legislation to prevent future executive overreach. The presidency, meanwhile, faced scrutiny and calls for restraint. This pivotal moment redefined the boundaries of executive power and underscored the resilience of democratic checks and balances. The nation, having held its breath, now exhaled, a collective sigh of relief and anticipation for what comes next. The Supreme Court had spoken and the landscape of American governance was forever changed. As the dust settles, legal scholars, economists, and policy experts weigh in on the Supreme Court's historic decision. Many agree that the ruling signals a new era of judicial oversight over presidential authority, especially in matters of trade and national economics. Experts predict that future presidents will face stricter scrutiny when invoking emergency powers, with Congress likely to assert greater influence over decisions that impact the global economy. Trade analysts anticipate a period of adjustment as businesses and markets recalibrate to the restored balance of power. The ruling is expected to encourage more predictable and stable trade policies, reducing the risk of sudden unilateral tariffs that can disrupt international commerce. Looking forward, some warn that political tensions could escalate as both Congress and the White House test the new limits of their authority. Others see an opportunity for bipartisan cooperation to establish clearer guidelines for executive action, ensuring that no single branch can unilaterally reshape the nation's economic destiny. One thing is certain, the Supreme Court's decision has not only resolved a contentious chapter in American history, but also set the stage for a future where the balance of power is more closely watched and more fiercely debated than ever before. The story of presidential power and tariffs is far from over.